If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. They say that as goes California, so goes the nation. Well, perhaps they should say that as goes Boston, so goes the nation. It was TBA who coined the term leapfrogging, describing how immigrant groups are being allowed to vault over black people and being able to have opportunities that black folks, particularly those of us who came out of slavery in this country, have been shut out of. Now, when it comes to the bootlick class, they've always had this delusion that as long as they kiss as much of the white supremacist behinds as possible, well, that's going to be their way to at least get some sort of bootlick set aside for themselves. They get to be the pet Negro, like Cedric Richmond. They think to themselves that if they can just find the right white benefactor, why, you can be their pet mascot, and that'll give you a safe place under white supremacy. But as I've always told you, bootlicking is a career path that doesn't come with a retirement plan. All you gotta do is look at what's going on in the current Boston mayoral race if you want to see this in excruciatingly sharp detail. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, right now, Boston has a black acting mayor, Kim Janey. Kim Janey became acting mayor of Boston because the former mayor, he left to become the labor secretary for Joe Biden. So that's how Kim Janey got the job. She was the city council president. And when the mayor vacated the office, that pretty much automatically gave her the spot. And that being the case, apparently she, I suppose, was counting on the power of incumbency to keep her in the mayor's office, but apparently things aren't going to plan. The headline from the Boston Globe: how did Boston miss its moment to elect a black leader? Spoilers, stupid, they didn't miss anything. They don't want a black leader. They don't want a black anything. They don't want black folks in the city. They didn't miss an opportunity. They got exactly the outcome that they wanted. It's about shutting black folks out and continuing the process of strangling black people out of existence. Do it economically, do it politically, make sure they have no resources, that they have absolutely no advocates, certainly not when it comes to policy making. Now, before we go any farther, as you see on your screen, there's 3 black would-be mayoral candidates. All 3 of them, they got knocked out in the first round, and the 2 individuals who are going to be going on to vie for the mayorship of Boston is going to be Michelle Wu and Anissa Isibai George, who, by the way, both of them brag about the fact that they are the children of immigrants. And the white media brags about that as well. Allow me to read a couple of excerpts from this Boston Globe piece for you. Quote, "Black Bostonians thought the moment had come." Probably the ones who were looking for a job from City Hall. "When the mayor's office opened up after a national awakening on race, a field of credentialed candidates of color rose to the challenge." Now, I gotta break that sentence down a little bit. A national awakening on race? No, it was an awakening, all right, but an awakening to the rising black threat to white supremacy. It wasn't an awakening on race. Nation couldn't wait to hit the snooze button again. We just wouldn't let them. And a field of credentialed candidates. Oh, they got credentials, all right, because that's what white supremacy does. It credentializes its tools. Tries to give them all manner of prizes and awards and honorifics in the hope that this is going to give them legitimacy. Credentialed candidates of color indeed. But to continue, a city that has long struggled with racial tension seemed to have landed at its moment of redress. Struggled with racial tension? If by that you mean fought to keep black folks down, that's the tension going on. Because in reality, it hasn't been struggling with racial tension. It's been fighting to make sure that black people remain in a subservient and suppressed state. Oh, but we don't say that. We don't put black in there. It's racial. It's candidates of color. And yet the headline says black. See how they do a little switch up there on you? Notice that? We went from talking about black Bostonians to talking about candidates of color and racial tension. Yeah, the conversation got deracialized real fast, didn't it? But Tuesday's preliminary election delivered the stinging realization that Boston has only changed so much. You know, I think if I talk to black Boston residents, they'll say the city ain't changed one damn bit. A woman will be elected mayor for the first time, but she'll either be Michelle Wu, the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants, or Anissa Isibai George, whose father was a Tunisian Arab Muslim and her mother of Polish descent. In either case, a woman who brings the lived experience of a first-generation American. There you have a garden variety example of leapfrogging. And by the way, that whole thing about lived experience, Kamala Harris threw that term around a lot. Lived experience of first generation Americans. Yeah, what's the lived experience? That as long as you're not black, particularly a black person who came out of slavery in this country, well, the U.S. is going to be going ahead and making sure that they grease the skids for you. Because there happens to be a racial agenda that's at work here. And they look at immigrants as being a political solution to a racial problem. Now, the headline asks, how did Boston miss its moment to elect a black leader? The real question is, why did Boston go out of its way to make sure that it leapfrogs somebody past the black candidates? You take a look at the racial demographics of Boston, and what you see is the city is 53% white, 25% black, and we know that they undercount us, but still, and only 9.6% Asian. And it's also only about 5% or so other. We'll get into the significance of that in a moment. Black folks outnumber Asians in Boston by 3 times. There's 3 times as many black folks in the city as Asians if you go with the official numbers. And yet, when it came time for the Democrat machine there to decide who's going to be the mayoral candidate, they said, well, it ain't going to be a black person. We're going to be choosing an Asian person. This is what Jason Black and I have been telling you for the longest time. You're sitting here talking about it's just purely a numbers game, and you got these other groups who are showing, resources are going to be far more important, especially if those resources are brought to bear in your own interests. And that's what's happened here. Because you see, while there might be one article saying, how did Boston miss its moment to elect a black leader? The rest of the white media, especially in Boston, they're celebrating. As far as they're concerned, thank God we can finally bury this issue of race that black folks have brought up. And we're going to be using an Arab Muslim woman and a Taiwanese woman to do it. And what exactly have Wu and George said that they're going to be doing for black people in Boston? Absolutely nothing. Black folks are a quarter of the population in Boston, but 0% of the conversation in the mayoral race now that the 3 black candidates are gone. As far as they're concerned, we can get back to talking about what we're going to be doing for everybody except for black people. Now, the article goes on to say, despite the hype and hopes for a post-racial Boston or a post-racial America, white voters did not enthusiastically embrace the black candidates for mayor. Gee, I'm so surprised. Worse, the 2 black women in the race landed only 275 votes apart, placing 3rd and 4th, giving credence to concerns that they hurt one another's chances. The article quotes a woman named Fia Bro Bowling, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, who calls herself a media and communications strategist. She can try to communicate that name, perhaps. She said, this election moved Boston 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I'm struggling to see the forward part for black people in this one. What's the forward part? See, again, this is one of these damn consultants who's clearly holding out a fig leaf for a job. But there's all kinds of silliness apparently going on in Beantown. Because, according to the article, there was an initiative of black voters called Wakanda 2, which was nothing more than a get out the vote campaign for the current acting mayor, Kim Janey. But Kim Janey's getting a real harsh lesson in the fact that she may be acting mayor, but the city, they're not going to act like they want her as mayor. That's what's happening right now. The article goes on to explain that Kim Janey is a 56-year-old grandmother, was an education advocate who often noted on the trail that she'd become a single mother at age 16 and had struggled with housing insecurity. Her family is known for development in Roxbury, and she gained support from old-school Black Boston, including Mel King, the city's first Black mayoral candidate, who endorsed her on the eve of the election. So what we had here was we had this 56-year-old grandmother who had become a single mother in her teens and who apparently was depending on them old Negroes. That's what she was depending on. And yet, what did she have to do when it came to young black folks? The closest that she could get to anything for younger black folks, any black folks under the age of retirement, that is, calling her Get Out the Vote campaign Wakanda. We're talking about tangibles out here, and she brings us a Marvel movie slogan. And then she wonders why it was that she got her butt spanked. She wonders why. Yeah, see, you're using the roly-poly Martin play, but I don't know why y'all going to them young folks. Y'all need to be going to them older folks, because them young folks, they don't be turning out. They ain't gonna get off their ass and do a damn thing. Y'all need to go to them older folks. Well, Kim Janey tried that. How'd that work out? Support from old school Black Boston. You mean the old bastards who have been losing since forever? The ones who didn't put any points on the board, they didn't accomplish a damn thing. You're in the same position that they were in. So please tell me how much good they did you. And next I want to focus on a part of the article that deals with the other two candidates, the two immigrants who came out on top in this one. And before I go any farther, I do think it bears noting that this George woman, she uses the last name George, but her name is Isabi. I wonder how much of a big deal was made about the fact that she's a Tunisian Muslim. By the way, did Boston have any sort of unpleasantness regarding Muslims and a marathon in the last few years? I'm just saying, you would think that Boston would be on full alert. Oh, won't be any Muslim mayors around here. And yet they looked and said, hey, if we got a choice between a black one and a Muslim, let's choose the Muslim. As one political expert said, the election seemed to draw traditional turnout, which analysts had predicted would benefit Isai B. George, who casts a more moderate profile. She's a Democrat, by the way. And who draws support from older, white, more conservative, and more reliable voters. Now, of course, as you see from the photo, the Anissa Asiibi George woman, she happens to be half Arab, half Polish. Now, as I pointed out to you earlier, Boston's only about 5% or so other. You got white folks who are 53 or so percent of the population, black folks a little over 25, Asians about 9%, and other about 5%. So this woman comes from a group that's like 5% of the population, and yet she's going to be 50% of who the Democrats got on the ballot to be mayor of Boston. But understand that little title, other, that's some trick bag language. Census counters or whomever can try to claim other, but these people, they don't consider themselves to be other at all. You look at their driver's licenses and their birth certificates, and these people, they identify themselves as white. TBA did a brilliant broadcast a few days ago holding on to honorary whiteness, where you had an Arab attorney / celebrity, Z-list celebrity, who was complaining that after 9/11 his white card was revoked. So you got one of these people, one of these Arabs, immigrants, who was considering himself white until the society let him know there's a huge asterisk beside that, buddy. And of course, of all the candidates, she's got the lightest skin. And yet, even with all that, this woman's light-skinned and she dyes her hair blonde. She's half Polish. And yet you got CNN claiming that this Asaibi George woman is a woman of color. They actually did that. Headline, Boston mayoral race narrows to Michelle Wu and Anissa Asaibi George, 2 women of color for the city's top job. So now this Asaibi George woman, she's being bestowed a woman of color. Yeah, in the same way that Rachel Dolezal is a woman of color. So now I don't feel so bad about the 3 black candidates getting knocked out of the box. Why? We have a choice of 2 women of color. Wasn't that what the Boston Globe's article started off with? Second sentence of the very first paragraph, candidates of color. That's the white media narrative. We need to move past this whole black thing. It's about people of color. Yeah, just so long as the color isn't black. So I guess that explains how it is that all of those bigots in Boston were able to overlook her Muslim heritage. No wonder they were able to overlook that very easily. They were going, well, race matters more than religion in America, don't you know? Well, it's nice to know that that little unpleasantness with the Boston Marathon has been put behind the city. Any questions about whether or not Muslims in Boston are seen as lesser than, are going to be persecuted or mistreated? I think we can go ahead and put those unfounded questions to bed. It wasn't a problem before the Boston Marathon and clearly is no problem whatsoever now. So next time somebody wants to talk about the plight of Muslims in America, you can go ahead and point to Miss Asiibi George. You can go ahead and point to her, and Muslims doing just fine. They're going to be all right. However, there was an observation that had to be made, which was that despite the surge in activism of recent years and a mayoral field composed entirely of candidates of color, those voters do not appear to have delivered this time. And the article goes on to specify exactly who they're talking about. They have a quote from Wilnelia Rivera, a political consultant who supported the Wu candidate, and she said, "But we also had lower than expected turnout in communities of color and in black communities in particular." There you have it. In an election where you had not 1, not 2, but 3 black candidates, one of them the acting mayor, although she called herself mayor for the entire time that she's actually been in this appointed position. She's been calling herself mayor, leaving off the acting part. I guess that rubs some folks, particularly in the white community, the wrong way. But nonetheless, you had 3 black candidates on the ballot. And yet there was lower than expected turnout in the black community in particular. Yeah, you see, black folks are looking and going, what's in it for us? Y'all need to show up and vote. Too many folks done died. What am I going to get? Well, for communities of color, no. For black people, well, when it comes to underserved community, no. For black people, well, when it comes to disadvantaged, no. Black people, when it comes to disenfranchised, no. Black people, historically disadvantaged, no. Black people. This is the reason why you need a black media that calls it like it really is. Why was there lower than expected turnout among the black vote? Because there was lower than expected black agenda on the ballot. There's a direct connection between the two. When black folks understand they're going to get something for their vote, they're going to get something tangible for their vote, they turn out. Hell, that's what happened during the first Obama campaign. There were black folks, I'm going to get me a cell phone and this, that, and the third. Misguided as they were, they thought they were going to get some tangible benefits. Of course they turned out. And what was it that the 3 black candidates were offering? We're going to bring the city together. Okay, that means white interests, particularly white real estate interests, they're going to get taken care of. And black folks, they're going to get a street named after some black civil rights whomever. That's, in other words, the same old two-step. That's what they saw. And I'm sure you probably didn't miss the low-key gender warring that this little pathetic piece was trying to put forward. Oh yeah, we're going to be focusing. The question is, we had black women on the ballot. That's sprinkled throughout the article. I spared you most of that. But they were doing their low-key black men and black women are in a fight against each other, and black women in particular need to be leading the way, and all of that nonsense. We just left that out because we do intelligent conversation here. But you see what happened. You got this Michelle Wu woman. She happens to be an immigrant. Anissa Asiibi George, she's a Muslim immigrant. And this is who white Boston made it clear we got enough votes to put them in contention, and we're going to do that. Hey, what about the acting mayor? What about her? Huh? What about her? Why? We voting for one of them for what? Yeah, that's what happened. Oh, by the way, Kim Janey, she did all of the low-key pandering that she could. She was basically trying to put a little bit of Fox News in her step. Didn't do her no damn good. And I would be neglectful if I didn't mention that while we're on the subject of leapfrogging by these immigrant groups, Michelle Wu happens to be the first Asian American elected to the Boston City Council. So she's been elected, first Asian American, and now already saying, well, you know what? We think this woman should be mayor. We want to place her within striking distance of getting elected mayor. No, it's not hard at all to see how this happened. If you're the white media and you want to make sure that you keep black folks thinking in the same old terms, then what you tell them is all of this old nonsense where you go into a whole bunch of nobodies and they're going to try to talk around the interest of the black community. You know, the same old tried and true bootlicks and butter biscuit begging bastards, the same ones who have not done a damn thing for black folks, but the white media calls them leaders. You know, old school black Boston. Yeah, old school. Old, uneducated, ain't produced a damn thing. Yeah, that's who you go to. These are your leaders. This is what the white media likes. They like trying to convince you your leaders are a bunch of do-nothings. But the young folks, they weren't fooled. But the problem is, what the hell are they going to get? It is not enough merely to not fall for the okie doke with these bought and paid for black bootlicks. You got to have some agendas on the table and people who are going to do what you want. That's the next great challenge. And that's not going to be coming from the white media. That has to come from the black grassroots. That solution has to start with the soil. Because right now, I would hope that with enough of the black youth in Boston, enough of the black folks who are not looking forward to a retirement check, I would hope that there is enough discontent in the soil to start shaking things up, but that starts locally. Nobody's going to come in on a white horse, black horse, or any other colored horse to save you. But fortunately, you put your heads together, you'll be able to save yourselves. But understand, what happened in Boston, it just goes to show, especially when it comes to the younger black folks, all of these little bootlicks who the white media keeps trying to trot out, it doesn't matter how many of their hand-picked, bought and paid for, approved of Negro mouthpieces they trot out. The younger black folks, they're looking and going, these guys ain't bringing a damn thing. Changing the conversation. It's a matter of, no, you're not going to sit here and put three black folks in front of us and think that this is somehow going to make us look and say, well, we got to choose one of them now. No, it's the agenda that determines whether or not you get black support. Turning out the black vote ain't going to be the result of saying Wakanda. Well, all the kids are talking about Wakanda. They talking about Wakanda and we going to talk about it too. Yeah, it did it. By the way, since Kamala Harris was the one who decided to pioneer that pathetic little strategy, just out of curiosity, how well did saying Wakanda and doing the Wakanda salute and all that, how well did that work for her presidential campaign? I mean, she's enjoying her first term as president, though, right? Right? Now, if Joe Biden didn't decide to arbitrarily appoint her vice president, Kamala Harris would be back in California, no doubt under low-down Willie Brown's desk, trying to figure out what other office she might be able to suck up her way to. But the white media has begun the process of making sure that they whitewash all of this, telling you that things are not what they clearly are, because those Arabs who are up there in North Africa, they do not consider themselves to be people of color. The Polish damn sure don't consider themselves to be people of color. So by what stretch of the imagination does CNN say that Anisi George is a woman of color? How the hell does that work? This is what Neely Fuller told you about. White supremacy believes in controlling both sides of the conversation, while the Boston Globe was pretending to sympathize with the three black candidates, lamenting that they had all three been knocked out of the box first try. But don't worry about the black candidates being completely shut out. I mean, after all, they didn't have much black support anyway, and it's not that great a tragedy because after all, this is going to be a victory for candidates of color. Yeah, just not the black color, that's all. And by the way, you are right to ask, what kind of mamby-pamby policies have Wu or George said about black folks? And the answer is nothing. Oh, the most that they're talking about is the same old vague, indistinct chatter about police reform, which basically means giving more money to the thugs in blue. Ain't gonna be no punishment, by the way. That is definitely not on the table. And they're trying to paint it as if this Wu woman is she's some sort of progressive firebrand. Same cock and bull story that they tried with Bernie the Bigot Sanders. So you have a choice between a right-wing Democrat, a Democrat who leans hard right, and it's supposed to be a Democratic city. Boston's supposed to be a Democratic city, and yet it's as racist as any city you'll find down in the states of the old Confederacy. You can go down to the grimiest, most backward parts of Louisiana where they still dipping chaw and chewing on wheat stalks down there. And you could go to any place there and you'll find it's just as racist as Boston. Because when it comes to black people, there's no such thing as white Democrat or white Republican. No such thing as conservative or liberal. Those distinctions fade away. When you talk about black folks, it comes down to race, full stop. And this is part of the continuing effort to make sure that the interest of black people and the condition of black people is completely and thoroughly buried so as to expedite what is meant to be the eventual elimination of black people. You can look at the policy and see that there's a clear program at work. This stuff is not happening accidentally. You make sure that it's very easy for people to come in from outside the United States. That way you can point and say, well, here are some people who are not from the U.S. and look how much better they're doing, etc., etc. And even when the historic and current oppression of black people makes it excruciatingly clear that our condition cannot be compared to anyone else's, well, the white media and the white politicians will have a few black bootlicks, many of whom consider themselves to be primarily biracial or primarily LGBTQ or primarily immigrant or whatever. They're going to find somebody with the requisite amount of melanin and whose hair texture is just so, who will say that black people's concerns are no more pressing and hence no more important than anyone else's. And that, of course, is going to be the line that they hide behind. It's a script. They choose who is going to be allowed on stage and who won't. They put the words into their puppets' mouths. It's a stage-managed production. And finally, now that they have bestowed permission upon themselves to go in on us because they had their own little hand-picked bootlick puppet say that it was okay, then they go ahead and begin the process of elimination. And that's how the script works. And of course, you're not going to be putting them on the spot. You don't put Michelle Wu on the spot. Say, as a Vietnamese American, what do you think about Asian racism against black people? What do you think about Asians who have businesses in black neighborhoods but don't hire any black people and don't do business with any black people? Hey, we need for you as an Asian American politician, we need you to answer for things like New Orleans City Councilwoman Cindy Gwynn talking about how black folks have a preference for greasy fried chicken places. What do you think about that? You going to denounce her? What are you going to say about that? Now, she's not going to be held up as a spokesperson, especially to chastise or otherwise castigate or call out racism in the Asian American community against black folks. No, there's not going to be any uncomfortable moments like that. We're not going to make that into a litmus test or something that you can look forward to if you're going to call yourself being the representative for a city that's 25% black, at least 25% black. And yet nobody's asking, where does this woman stand when it comes to Asian racism against black people? Oh, no. That would be against the media narrative. Because as we all know, it's black folks who happen to be denying Asians jobs, right? It's black folks who are running around talking grimy and greasy about Asians. We all know how black politicians do that all day long, right? It's black personalities on TV who are running Asians into the ground. Certainly is not anybody like Michelle Malkin. Certainly you don't have anybody like Juju Chang running around, right? Trying to get Daniel Holtzclaw off the hook. No, there's not going to be any sort of litmus testing like that, unless it comes from the black media. And of course, nobody's going to be asking any questions about ECEB George. They're not going to be talking to her and saying, hey, your parents, your folks up there in Tunisia, how have they been treating the black Tunisians? How have they been treating the Africans up there? You can look and see the mistreatment of black people in Tunisia all over the damn place. Now, of course, if Tunisia, if the Arab ruling class in that country had a history of hostility towards, say, Israel, there'd be questions about that. Oh, she'd be told, you got to denounce this, that, and the third. Oh, but because of the fact that this woman happens to come from the right kind of Arab country where they only mistreat black people, since black people are the ones who her folks in Tunisia mistreat, that's okay. And hey, she's half Polish anyway, and that being the case, we're not trying to damage the brand. We don't want to set any sort of precedent where politicians are going to be told, you and whatever ethnic group you come from, if you happen to come from if you're an immigrant from a country that mistreats black people or has disdain towards black people or a track record of abusing and persecuting black people, you're going to need to answer for that. We're going to need you to go on the record about that. No, that doesn't happen at all. No, we wouldn't want to do that. And you're not going to be having any black politicians calling for that either. Has it skipped your notice that Cedric Richmond's from down south? I posted for you his Twitter tweets about how he was giving all of this praise to, we need to be thanking these Asian immigrants, and I'm going to do everything that I can for you. And that's why he didn't say anything about Cindy Gwynn. Look at the bastard now. He's in the Biden administration, basically carrying Joe Biden's bag or his bag of medications, whichever the case may be. Yeah, these bootlicks, they know the job and they know what their real job is. Their job is to contain or otherwise tamp down black discontent. I'm going to talk to them racist white folks over there. I'm going to give them a piece of our minds and let them know they can't do this. Okay, well, what are black people going to be getting? Well, we can't be putting pressure on them now. So you put too much pressures on them, they won't be able to get reelected. Well, we already got them elected, so they need to earn the vote that they've already gotten. We already gave them the vote and put them in office. They need to earn that vote. Now, well, next election, you sees. That's their job. They understand that that's their job. So I don't feel sorry for any of these three bootlicks who didn't become mayor. They didn't say they were going to do a damn thing for black folks, not anything substantive. All of them were hoping that they were going to use this as a springboard to higher political office, raise their political profile, and get themselves a better gig, maybe even in Washington, D.C. Why, if a two-bit half-wit like Simone Mammy Sanders and Corinne Stud Pierre can get themselves a broom closet in the basement of the White House, why, anything's possible for a Negro who's willing to lick boots enough. Oh yeah, when you get those blisters on your tongue from all the boots that you've licked, what will you have to show for it? Hopefully a White House job on my resume. Some of my commenters asked, why is it that these bootlicks never seem to learn? First of all, there's no cure for stupid. That's why I use that phrase. There are people in this world, a lot of them in this world, who are congenital idiots. And secondly, the bootlick has no other skills other than licking boots. That's it. Please tell me, if Roly-Poly was not busy begging for a job from CNN, what the hell would he be doing? He's doing it right now, begging for a job. Cedric Richmond, if he wasn't running around trying to polish the behinds of whomever he can get close to, if he wasn't busy sucking up to them for a job, what the hell would he be doing? Jim Clyburn and his worthless progeny, Mignon Clyburn, only skills that those two have is being able to give compliments to whatever white power broker is standing in front of them. If they weren't doing that, what the hell would they be doing? This is the reason why you don't see these guys building any businesses or building anything. They can't. They don't have the ability to. Only thing they know how to do is to suck up to whomever's in front of them. That's the only skill, such as it is, that they have. Now to you, that may be incomprehensible, but that's because A, you're not an idiot, and B, you've actually bothered to cultivate some skills. But for the bootlick, as far as they're concerned, as long as I can make excuses for massa with a straight face, that's all I need. That's my ticket to ride. And to them, that's smart. Well, I wonder how smart acting mayor Kim Janey is feeling right now. Or Andrea Campbell, or John Barros, or any of their would-be Wakanda 2 supporters. No, family, there truly is no substitute for having a black agenda. There is no substitute for actually having something to offer black folks. The days of shucking and jiving and BSing your way past a critical mass of the electorate, those days are drawing to a close. When it comes to black voters, it's drawing to a close. The old civil rights generation that was all they cared about was, if I want to feel good about seeing me a black person in the mayor's office. What did they promise you? Not a damn thing, but they're going to be in the mayor's office. That's all that matters to me. Those days are coming to a close now. You can no longer come up to black folks, black voters, especially the younger black voters, and all you've got in one hand is some rhetoric and some empty highfalutin talk about bringing the city together. And in the other hand, you've got absolutely nothing. As far as the black vote's concerned, you came to them completely empty-handed. We don't need hot air. What we require are tangibles. And if that happens to be a deal breaker, if that's not feasible, or you're going to think to yourself that all you have to do is bring us some scare talk about, ooh, them Republicans are going to get in there now, and them racists going to be in there. You need me to be in there, because if not, them racists going to be in there now. That old tactic of recycling the old, them racists gonna be worse than me, no matter how useless I am. I ain't bringing you a damn thing, but it would be even worse as if them racist so-and-sos was in there. The days of using that scare tactic are done. You're not going to be scaring black folks to the polls by doing the old, well, there's some shadowy evil racist who's waiting to get you, and I'm the only thing standing between you and them. The racists are already getting us. That's the problem. And you've made it clear you're not going to do a damn thing about it. So that being the case, black folks in Boston are clearly holding out, not merely for something better, but just holding out for something. Because they saw 3 empty suits in front of them. They saw 3 empty nothings in front of them. Now, finally, I'm going to give a message to the black grassroots. The ground is fertile and ready now. I've always said that you're going to have a critical mass of black folks who finally decide that they're going to get their heads on right when it hurts enough. We are approaching that line now. We're approaching that point where it's going to be hurting enough now, where they're going to be ready for the message of black empowerment. But what we require at this point is enough black folks on the ground who are organized and ready to bring that message. Now, you don't need anybody's permission to do this. You're already familiar with the basic package, with the basic message. You understand what it's called for. And all of that Wakanda this and trying to do that, all that corny nonsense, we're getting past all that now. It comes down to substance. What are you doing substantively? That's why we keep using the word tangibles. I need something that I can see, something I can hold in my hands and put in my bank account. Now, if you're talking about that, that's tangibles. But all of this, we need to repair the spirit of the city and bring people together. I can't see that. I can't put that in my hands. I can't put spirit in my hands. Spirit, by its very definition, is intangible. So, of course, that means you damn sure can't put it in your bank account. Because I'll tell you right now, the conversations that Isaibi George and Michelle Wu are having with the white Bostonians who they want the support of, they ain't talking about no lifting the spirit of the city. They're talking about what it is that the white constituents are going to continue to get to make sure that their monopoly remains in place. Making sure that the white Boston economic, political, and social monopoly remains in place, remains unchanged, and that black people will not be allowed to encroach upon it or have anything in the city. Making sure that the status quo remains the status quo. That's the conversation that they're having. And it doesn't take much imagination to figure out that it's a conversation that Kim Janey and her other 2 cohorts were not having with the black community. It doesn't take much imagination to figure out that that's not on the agenda when they come talk to us, because it's never on the agenda when they come talk to us. They talk to us and it's always this aspirational fluff. Remember Dr. King and the importance of vote is a freaking civics lesson when they come to us, and a poor civics lesson. Well, your civics lesson, those days are done. But what comes next? The only ones who can answer that is you. You're the only ones who can provide the answer as to what comes next. We know what needs to be done. And understand, they're trying to figure out, white supremacy is trying to figure out ways to bury us, but to do it in such a way where they can claim that, why, we didn't bury black folks. Why, it just kind of happened on its own. And that's where the use of proxies comes into play. preferably from an immigrant, non-black background, but in a pinch, they'll take a black immigrant, a Barack Obama, or an ostensibly Kamala Harris. I already told you about the Congressional Black Caucus. It's filled with more of those Horn of Africa immigrants and more of those people from Jamaica, from the Caribbean and such. The Congressional Black Caucus ought to go ahead and be honest and call themselves the Immigrant Black Caucus, because that's what they stand for. Well, what do the people stand for when it comes to those of us who came out of slavery in this country? People who are not black folks, who ain't immigrants, who've been down from day one. What's on the agenda for us? The only way that our agenda is going to be put into the national discourse is going to be if we force it into the national discourse. In fact, we should revel in that. That we're going to take the black agenda and shove it down these white supremacists' throats and watch them choke on it. We should revel in that. We should be rubbing our hands like freaking Birdman and going, yeah, you know what's up. You know what's up. But the only way that heat's going to show, the only way that fire is going to start burning is if we're the ones who light the flame. Nobody's going to do it for us. The people are now more ready than they've been in 3 generations for a real black empowerment message. All of that running in place that the civil rights generation did, that generation's dying out. But we have to provide a substantive alternative for that black grassroots, because I think it's safe to say now they're ready. They're certainly more ready than they've been in any point in my lifetime. They're more ready for the message now, but you got to be ready to bring it. That's the next step for black empowerment. It is not merely enough that we reject the empty suits like Kim Janey. We got to make sure that we have some black empowerment that's put on the ballot and that it comes from us. The Bootlicks don't have a future, so the joke's on them. But unless we take power in our own hands, unless we get serious and organized at the grassroots, build where you stand, unless we do that, we won't be having a future as a group either.